husband died 14 months ago, or so I believed. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking because I thought the same thing when it happened, that I was one of those women who lose their minds after loss. That grief had finally taken something from me I couldn't get back. But I'm not that woman. I am 71 years old. I taught high school English for 34 years in Columbus, Ohio. I have read enough stories to know when I am living inside one. And what I am about to tell you is not grief. It is not confusion. It is not the kind of thing that happens to other people. It happened to me. His name was Norman. Norman Arthur Whitfield. We met at a church picnic in the summer of 1979, and I thought he was the most handsome, most serious man I had ever seen. He brought me lemonade without me asking. He asked about my mother before he asked about me. I was 25 years old, and I thought, this is the kind of man you build a life with. And we did. 42 years. A house on Elmwood Drive with a covered porch and a dogwood tree in the front yard that I planted the year our son was born. 2 cars. 1 dog named Biscuit who lived to be 14. A marriage that I believed with everything in me was real. Norman was an insurance actuary. Quiet work, numbers work, the kind of job that suited him. He was not a flashy man, he didn't need to be. We had a life I was proud of. We took a trip to Savannah every spring. We hosted Thanksgiving every year without fail. I made his birthday cake from scratch every October, German chocolate, his favorite. And he always pretended to be surprised, even after 4 decades. When he got sick, it came fast. That's the thing about pancreatic cancer. It doesn't announce itself politely. 1 month, he was shoveling the driveway. 3 months later, he was on oxygen. By the following February, he was gone. I held his hand. I was in the room. I watched the monitor go flat. I planned the funeral myself because that is the kind of woman I am. I wrote his obituary. I chose the hymns. I picked the casket, dark walnut with a cream interior, because he always said he liked things that were understated and dignified. There were over 200 people at the service. His co-workers came. Our neighbors came. Our son flew in from Seattle. I thought the hardest part was over. It was not. 14 months after I buried my husband, I was standing in the frozen foods aisle of the Kroger on Henderson Road. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon, the kind of grey March day that makes you feel like winter will never actually end. I had my cart. I had my list. I was reaching for a bag of green beans, and I saw him. He was at the end of the aisle, maybe 30 feet away, wearing a dark blue jacket I did not recognize. His hair was shorter. He had grown a beard. But the way he stood, one hand in his pocket, head tilted slightly to the left when he was reading something, that was Norman. That was exactly Norman. I did not move. I could not move. My hand was still on the freezer door, and the cold air was pouring out around me, and I remember thinking, very clearly and very strangely, that I should close the freezer door so I wasn't wasting electricity. That is what shock does to a mind. It finds the smallest, most ordinary thing to hold on to. A woman came up beside him. Young. Maybe late 30s. She said something and he laughed, actually laughed, tipped his head back, and she put her hand on his arm, and they moved together toward the produce section like 2 people who had been moving through grocery stores together for years. Someone touched my shoulder. "Mom, are you all right?" It was a young man in a Kroger vest stocking the shelf beside me. He was looking at me with the kind of careful concern you give to elderly women who might be about to fall. "Fine," I said. "Thank you, I'm fine." I was not fine. I left my cart in the aisle. I walked to the front of the store and I sat down on the bench near the customer service counter. My heart was doing something irregular. I put my hand on my chest the way you do when you're trying to remind yourself that you're still alive. A few minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 20. Then I got up, walked to my car, and sat in the parking lot. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, and I thought, either I am losing my mind or my husband is alive, and I am not the kind of woman who loses her mind. I drove home. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat at the kitchen table where Norman and I had eaten breakfast every morning for 31 years, and I thought very carefully about what I had seen. The posture, the head tilt, the laugh, the hands, There are things about a person that don't change regardless of a haircut or a beard. The way Norman held his body was something I had memorized over 4 decades. You don't forget that. You cannot forget that. I went to bed. I did not sleep. The next morning, I drove back to Kroger. I told myself I was just shopping. I walked every aisle. He wasn't there. I bought my green beans and my coffee, and I drove home feeling foolish. But then I thought about our son Marcus. Wait, no, I cannot use that name. Our son's name is Theodore in this story, and I will call him by that, Theodore. He had been strange on the phone since Christmas, quieter than usual. When I called, he answered, but there was always a reason to get off quickly. He had a meeting. The baby was fussing. He'd call me back. He usually called back, but lately he didn't always. I had told myself it was just the distance, the busy life of a man in his 40s with a toddler and a demanding job. I had told myself it was nothing. Now I was not so sure. I called him that afternoon. He answered on the third ring. Hey, Mom. What's up? I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Silence. Just a half-second too long. Sure, he said. What is it? Is your father alive? Another silence. This one longer. Mom. Theodore. Is your father alive? He exhaled. Long and slow. And that exhale told me everything before a single word came out of his mouth. I wanted to tell you, he said. I almost called you so many times. I set the phone down on the kitchen table. I did not hang up. I just set it down, and I sat there and I looked at the dogwood tree through the window, the one I planted the year Theodore was born, and I thought about 42 years. I thought about holding Norman's hand in that hospital room. I thought about the casket I chose, dark walnut, cream interior, and who was inside it, and whether there was anyone inside it at all. I picked the phone back up. Talk, I said. He talked. It took a long time to get the whole story, and even when I had all of it, I still had to sit with it for days before I could hold it without shaking. Here is what happened. Norman had another life. He had been maintaining it for, and this is the part that still makes me grip the edge of the table when I say it out loud, 11 years. A woman in Dayton, 60 miles away. Her name doesn't matter to me. What matters is that she existed, and he chose her, and at some point in the last few years of our marriage, he decided he wanted that life more than he wanted this one. But he was a coward about it. That is the plainest way I know to say it. He did not want to divorce me because of the house, because of the pension I would have been entitled to, because of what people would say at church. Norman cared deeply about what people said. So he made a different plan. He actually got sick. That part was real. There was a cancer diagnosis, genuinely, but it wasn't as advanced as we were told. The doctor who told me he had months to live was not his real doctor. I don't know how he found the man. I don't know what was paid. What I know is that what I was told in that oncologist's office was not the truth, and the man I sat across from in that white coat was not who he said he was. The hospice nurses who came to our home in those final weeks, I believe they were real, or mostly real, or at least I believe they believed what they were doing. I don't know how much of that was arranged and how much was real illness managed carefully to look worse than it was. There were real symptoms. There was real weight loss. I watched my husband disappear in front of me, or what I thought was my husband disappearing. Then one night in February, he did not wake up, except that he did. Just not there. Not in our house. Not with me. Theodore had known for 4 months before the death. His father had called him, told him the truth, told him that he was leaving, and that this was the plan, and that it would be kinder to me, if I believed him dead rather than knowing he had chosen someone else. As if my grief was a gift he was giving me. As if the funeral, the obituary, the 200 people, the dark walnut casket, as if all of that was an act of mercy. Theodore said he had argued. He said he had told his father it was wrong. But when the moment came, he did not tell me. He flew in for the funeral, stood beside me at the graveside, held my hand when the hymns were sung, and he did not tell me. I thought it would destroy you, he said. And this doesn't, I said. He didn't have an answer for that. I want to tell you something about that period of days after I found out the truth, because I think it matters. I did not break down. I am not saying that to seem strong or to impress anyone. I am saying it because it surprised me. I had expected, when I sat with the reality of what had been done to me, that there would be a kind of collapse, that the woman who had spent 14 months grieving a man who was alive 60 miles away would finally fall apart. Instead, I felt something I can only describe as cold clarity. Every question I had been too polite to ask over 4 decades came back to me with perfect precision. The nights Norman worked late, the conference trips where he called too briefly, the way he sometimes looked at me across the dinner table with an expression I had always read as tiredness and now understood was something else entirely, the way he had been so specific about where he wanted to be buried. The way he had, in those final weeks, gently but clearly made sure all the financial accounts were organized in a way that, in retrospect, left him able to access things he should not have been able to access. He had taken money, not all of it, enough to be comfortable, enough to start again. I called my attorney that same week. I want to be clear about that. I did not wait. I did not sit with this and hope it would resolve itself. I called Miriam, who had handled our estate planning, and I told her everything, and she was quiet for a moment. And then she said, "Elaine, this is fraud. Multiple kinds of fraud." My name is Elaine. I should have told you that at the start. Elaine Whitfield, 71, retired English teacher, and apparently a woman whose life had been partially constructed out of lies. Miriam contacted the appropriate people. I will not walk you through every legal detail because some of it is still ongoing, and because, frankly, the paperwork of a thing like this is less interesting than people imagine. What I will tell you is this: when you fake your own death, you commit fraud. You commit insurance fraud if there is a life insurance policy, and there was a substantial one, which had been paid out to our son as beneficiary because Norman had updated the documents 3 weeks before the death. You potentially commit conspiracy. You may implicate others who knowingly assisted. Theodore was implicated. I want to be honest with you about how I felt about that, because it is the part of this story that I think about most. When Miriam told me that Theodore could face real consequences for his role in this, I felt 2 things at exactly the same time, with equal force. I felt grief, the real kind, the kind that actually is about loss, because this was my child, my son, the boy I had rocked to sleep and taught to read and driven to every baseball practice for 8 years, and cried over when he graduated and loved in the uncomplicated, unconditional way that is the particular gift and particular vulnerability of being a mother. And I also felt that he had made his choice. I did not shield him from what was coming. That is the truest thing I can tell you about who I am. I did not call Miriam and ask her to be careful around my son. I told her the truth about everything I knew, and I let the process be what it was going to be. Norman. I find I can still call him that, which is strange. Norman was located through means I won't describe in detail because I don't want to make this sound like a movie. The practical reality of finding someone who is 60 miles away and not being particularly careful about being found is that it is not that difficult. He was located, he was confronted, not by me personally, but by the appropriate authorities. He did not seem surprised when they came for him. Theodore told me later that his father had always known, somewhere in himself, that the plan had too many moving parts, that it had depended too much on my willingness to simply grieve and move on, that he had perhaps underestimated me. That word stayed with me. Underestimated. 42 years of marriage, and the final verdict was that he had underestimated me. I will tell you about the day I saw him, because you might be wondering whether I wanted to. Whether part of me, the part that had loved him, the part that had made his German chocolate birthday cake every October for 4 decades, whether that part of me wanted to see his face one more time. I did not request to see him. I did not go. There was nothing I needed from that encounter. I had written the words I needed to say in a letter, not to send to him, but for myself, because I'm an English teacher, and I know that language is how we make sense of things, and I needed to make sense of this. I wrote it, and I folded it, and I put it in the drawer of my bedside table, and I have not opened it since. What I did instead was walk through every room of the house on Elmwood Drive. I had been living in it as a kind of shrine. I recognize that now. I had not moved his reading chair. I had not touched the shelf where he kept his books. His winter coats were still in the front closet. I had been maintaining a space for a dead man who was not dead, grieving an absence that was a choice. I moved the reading chair to the garage sale pile that same Saturday. I donated the coats. I took the books he had left and I boxed them up and I dropped them at the library donation bin on the way to the grocery store. A different grocery store now, a new habit. And I did not feel sad doing it. I felt, if I am honest, something close to relief. The house is still mine. The court has been clear about that. The life insurance proceeds are being handled. The pension is mine. He did not manage to take what he intended to take, which I think is a particular kind of justice for a man who spent his career calculating risk. Theodore and I have spoken twice since all of this came to light. Both conversations were short. Both times I let him say what he needed to say, which was mostly apology, and both times I said what was true, which is that I hear him and that I need time and that I need time and that I cannot promise him what comes next. He is my son and I love him. But love does not cancel out what a person has done. I know that now in my bones. In a way, I did not know it before. Last month, I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center on Fifth Avenue. I had always wanted to paint. Norman had always said he didn't see the point of hobbies that didn't produce anything useful. And somewhere over the years, I had agreed with him, or I had pretended to agree with him, or I'd simply let my own wanting go quiet the way you do when you live alongside someone for long enough. I painted a dogwood tree in my third class. The instructor said my work had good instincts. I don't know if she was just being kind, but I chose to believe her. I am telling you this story not because I want sympathy, though I understand if you feel it, because I have felt it for myself in the quiet hours when no one is watching, and not because I want you to think of me as some kind of extraordinary woman. I am not extraordinary. I'm a retired English teacher in Columbus, Ohio, who planted a dogwood tree 39 years ago and still waters it every spring. What I want you to know is this. The thing that Norman underestimated was not my toughness. It was not my anger, though the anger was real, and is still real, and I will not pretend otherwise. What he underestimated was simpler than that. He underestimated was not flam the mat. He underestimated how well I knew him. 30 feet away in a frozen foods aisle, with a beard and a different jacket, 14 months after I stood at his graveside. I knew him. I knew the way he held his body. I knew the tilt of his head. I knew the laugh. You cannot be someone's wife for 42 years and not know them in the marrow. That knowledge was the thing he forgot to account for. For all his planning, for all his careful arrangement of documents and doctors and dates, he forgot that I had memorized him, that I carried him in my body the way you carry anything you have lived beside for a lifetime. He forgot that I was paying attention. I was always paying attention. The dogwood is blooming again this spring. It does that every year, regardless of what else is happening, regardless of what the winter was like. I sat on the porch this morning with my coffee, and I looked at it for a long time. Then I went inside and I started painting. I have thought a lot about the word underestimated since all of this came to light. Theodore told me that his father had always known, somewhere in himself, that the plan had too many moving parts, that Norman had perhaps underestimated me. I keep coming back to that word because I think it contains the whole story, if you look at it long enough. Norman was a man who spent his career calculating risk. He was precise, methodical, the kind of person who trusted numbers over instinct. And yet the one calculation he got completely wrong was the simplest one, the woman he had lived beside for 42 years. He forgot that I had been paying attention the entire time, not because I was suspicious, not because I was looking for something wrong, but because that is what it means to truly share a life with someone. You absorb them, you carry them in your body without even meaning to. And when something is wrong with what you're seeing, even when every official document says otherwise, some quiet part of you knows. I think about the choices Norman made over those years, not just the final plan, but the smaller ones that came before it. Each small dishonesty made the next one easier. Each year of living a double life required a little more distance from his own conscience, a little more willingness to see me not as a person, but as a problem to be managed. By the time he arranged what he arranged, I don't think he saw me clearly at all anymore, and that is what dishonesty does to a person over time. It doesn't just harm the one being deceived, it narrows the one doing the deceiving, it shrinks them. Theodore made a different kind of choice, but I have spent real time sitting with what it cost him too. He chose his father's comfort over his mother's truth. He told himself it was kindness. That is the thing about moral compromise. It almost always comes dressed up as something gentler. Kindness, protection, sparing someone pain. But what Theodore actually did was decide that his father's secret mattered more than my right to know my own life. That is not kindness. That is a choice, and choices have weight, and weight has consequence. I did not shield him from those consequences. I want to be honest about that, because I think it matters. The hardest part of having integrity is that it doesn't bend for the people you love most. I love my son. I will probably always love my son. But love is not the same as protection from what you've done. I learned that from this. I also learned that I had the capacity for a kind of clarity I didn't know I possessed. That when the moment came, I could separate what I felt from what I knew was right and act on the right thing anyway. That is what I would want anyone to take from this story. Not that I am strong in some exceptional way, because I'm not. I am a retired English teacher who planted a dogwood tree and made the same birthday cake for 4 decades. What I had was attention, the discipline to keep paying attention even when life had become comfortable, even when there seemed to be no reason to look carefully. And when the moment came that required everything I had, I found that 42 years of quiet observation had made me ready, even though I had never asked to be. You never know which ordinary Tuesday at the grocery store is going to change everything. You only know that you want to be the kind of person who, when that moment comes, doesn't look away.